All right, Maxime, I'm super excited because I've been waiting a long time to have you here.
Yes,
And
indeed.
so, yeah, I'm super excited that we're doing this because
Yeah.
I know we had a lot of long conversations during our
I
sessions.
did.
And I'm like, it would be great to have those, like recorded at some point because there's so many topics and interesting stuff. So yeah, thank you for making the ride from downtown Los Angeles.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Very exciting.
How long are you in LA for?
Um, until the end of the month, so about
Oh,
3 weeks.
okay. And you're in the same studio?
Yeah, yeah. Just continuously. Once I'm settled somewhere, I kind of need to
Mm.
stay. The switches are really intense on
Yeah,
my psyche.
yeah,
Need to, be able to focus. Tattooing is really about. There's so many parameters, so many very slight changes can throw you off. So I try to keep everything equal. I like to keep everything, even literally. I'm trying to put every bit of the bin, paper towels, my cart, whatever. Everything needs to be, if possible, in the same height, same positions that when I'm home. That way, I don't have to constantly readjust.
Mm. And do you have to travel with a lot of logistics when you come, like to LA or other places? Do you have to bring a lot of supplies with you, or you source
Not
everything
really,
locally?
unless I mean, if you're working at someone's studio and they're well equipped, but usually I send a bit of a shopping list and or I check with the studio what kind of supplies they have, what kind of brands they use, kind of types, because there's certain supplies that come in different types, and I'll check with them if they have something that's close enough to what I'm used to, and if not, I might like this time, for example, I had to bring some gloves because my uh, host, and bless them, they went really far to get me what I needed, but they got gloves that are too small for me, and it's not quite so. Even though they actually went ahead and got the gloves for me, it was so fortunately I thought it could happen, and I got my own. I brought my own gloves as well, but because it's LA, I didn't have to be too careful. And my assistant is here as well. She's permanently based here, so there's a lot of things that when I need to adjust, even since arriving, I told her for some specific things like the bandage type that I use, or some little type of what we call rinse cups that I like to have. I asked her to order some extra, like on the day that I arrived, and I saw that I still needed that. So it's kind of an adjustment like that I can do because I'm here for quite a while. If I'm only going somewhere for a couple of days, which I don't really do anymore, but if I did, I would probably take almost everything, at
Mm.
least a small quantity of almost everything, so that I don't have to wing it or like be kind of shorts of anything. Um, but yeah, it's interesting. Different people. I know for me, it throws me off a lot if I'm at the way I do the work. I really like to zone out, and I don't want to be constantly adjusting to my environment.
Yeah, you don't want things to get in your way of like doing the work, right?
Exactly.
Mm.
It's really I get in the zone, and everything that I need to adjust to gets me out of my zone, and I don't like it, and it's tiring, and it's yeah, it's tiring also because I do those long sessions, as you know. We do long sessions, and I'm expecting to be delivering and to be performing at the top of my game constantly, because that's what I promise and that's what I like. That's what
Yeah.
makes me happy. So in order to do that, I can't be just adjusting constantly. So that's also one of the reasons why I almost don't travel anymore, frankly.
Well, if you have to move like all your stuff for 2 days all the time, it's like super painful.
It is. What I do is because there's a lot of fun in the traveling.
Hmm.
Um, and there was something really something really interesting that happened during COVID, where a lot of the tattoo studios, most of the tattoo studios, I was working at my own. At that time, I lived in LA. We had for the during the lockdowns, we had to close the studios, and but I couldn't afford to not be working. I couldn't afford, and so I decided to travel to work, and I decided to go essentially where my clients are. So I took my luggage, packed the basics, and I traveled around, and I would just set up in hotel rooms,
Oh wow.
and which is almost the other end of the spectrum. It's so not made for tattooing.
It's rock and roll.
It's really, but it was very eye opening in a lot of ways. It really made me appreciate the connection that I have with my clients even more, because up until that point, I had mostly been working out of tattoo studios, my tattoo studios or other people's, but kind of big studios with a lot of artists and a lot of traffic constantly, a lot of music, whatever. And essentially, a point of view or a context where your peers really are the other artists in the studio, the other professionals, the people that you see every day. Those are your peers.
Mm.
Those are the people that you will be sharing with the most. And the client, you might have a good connection with the client, but they're a client, and come and go. But those experiences during COVID made me realize how much connection I had, in fact, with my clients, and the fact that really sometimes, I mean, th- they chose me. I mean, that they often I found that I had much more connection, like a much deeper connection with my clients than I do with other tattooists. Um, Not necessarily the people that who come to the studios but to my studios, that by definition are selected, and well, mutual selection, of course, but where there's some sort of connection, selection, where the connection can be optimal. But still, you're in the studio, everyone has stuff to do. They might be great artists, but they might not be, but still not be individuals that you connect with on a really deep level beyond the practice, the fact that you're tattooing. Uh, but then I realized that the connection that happens with clients is often deep in that sense that they're not tattoo professionals. Like we gathering, we as an encounter for the purpose of doing the tattoo, but the what what the person gets out of the tattoo is much more of a personal. Is much more personal, and what they more personal for them. But interestingly, it's much more than the tattoo in terms of what they get from me.
It's
And
more intimate connection too, because like you work on pretty big pieces, that have like pretty big impact on the people, and it's a commitment, to come see you and work, for several sessions of 6 hours on a very large piece, and sometimes it's not just one, obviously.
yeah,
So I assume the connection is a lot more intimate than you would have with somebody that you're not actually tattooing.
yes, and for this reason, he like obviously a client opens up and will share a lot of things. They are in a context that they're not familiar with, and I am, and I could be very gated and very um rigid on what I express, but I'm also being myself. I'm someone who I will very quickly get into. I love talking. I love talking with people. I love connecting, and for this reason, considering that most just any almost any given project will be 2-3 sessions. That's almost the minimal. The minimum amount of time I'll spend with a person will be like 2 or 3 sessions. During that time, they get to talk a lot, but I get to talk a lot. We
If
get
they
to
can
talk.
talk.
Yeah, it's a conversation really, and therefore they get to know me
Mm.
in ways that are much deeper than oh, I just got the tattoo from this person, but like they will also get, that exchange where both of us bring a pretty deep, um yeah, a generous amount of personal considerations, personal experiences, etc., etc. Um,
So that's a big part of the job being a tattoo artist
I don't know about other tattoo artists, but it's definitely a big part
of
of the
yours.
way I do, which is interesting because I often, I also don't want to be. I don't want a tattoo session to be a meet and greet. You
Mm.
know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
I don't want to be at a. I want people to still get like come not because they're getting a not because of a great time, but because of a great tattoo.
Yeah, right.
So I sometimes I'm like, I need to not make it too fun or too comfortable because I don't want somebody to be like, oh yeah, the tattoos, whatever, but I had a great time with that person. You know what I mean?
But
But
I think there's also something very special in the type of tattoo you do, on the large pieces, etc. Is that it's definitely something people are gonna remember for the rest of their life, and with like probably a significant importance in the experience, right? It's not just something like, hey, I'm gonna get tattooed on the weekend, and then 10 years later, you don't especially remember that moment. I think everything around it, like the connection with you, but also like the fact that you're under pain when you get tattooed, and you're committing to that, and it makes it like super special moment for people, and that's something they're gonna remember probably forever.
yeah, but also because of the commitment, because of the because of the all the logistics and the amount of things that people have to align in order to find themselves in a position to acquire such a thing. And so in every level, every I mean, the amount of people who told me, "Hey, I really want to do that, but let me check with my partner,"
Mhm.
or do you know what I mean? Like people are like, it's a big decision, and it implies discussing with people around them, like justifying it to family, partners, whatever, um, and them knowing that they will change their appearance. I mean, literally yourself, or I have several other clients, like literally, whom who went from having nothing pretty much to being sometimes entirely covered. I'm finishing a bodysuit now on a client, and and literally this person in his mid to late 40s went from no tattoo at all to being absolutely covered. And yeah, I feel like I mean, this person has 4 kids and a wife. I mean, do you know what I mean? And so like, so but it's interesting because it is part of the tattooing I do. That's the part. That's the tattooing that I fell in love with
Mm.
before I started tattooing.
It's
Uh,
very intentional. Like nobody really comes in. I would expect nobody to come in and say, hey, you know what, just tattoo whatever. I just want a tattoo and get out. Like you said, there's a lot of logistic commitment, discussions. It's like a super intentional art.
mhm. Yeah, 100%. And it, eh, but what is interesting is that I often think of, earlier you said, oh, is it's something about tattooing. I think it's something about this type of tattooing, not any. There's a lot of differences, and I feel in a lot of ways I do the tattoos of, there's a certain amount of people that I'll have as clients who might already have smaller bits. So recently, like 2 days ago, I'm talking to a Russian
Mhm.
person who was like, "Oh, I've been following your work for over 10 years, and I got like copies or things inspired by your work from other artists, but now I really want the real thing, and I'm going to do it big and do, you know do you see what I'm saying?" And and I think it's pretty cool. It's an interesting as well because it also mirrors or echoes the moment of life that I'm in currently. And it's I think, yeah, I really, it's all those years refining and figuring out what is it that I like to do most and that I'm the best at. And I think that's what it is.
It's interesting from you. I don't know many people like you actually, and that's what I find like super inspiring in some ways. You're a multi-faced artist, right? So you're a tattoo artist primarily, but you do a lot of other things too, right? And so when did you start tattooing, and when did you like start getting involved into creating Bleu, the magazine, and then the Swiss Fest type, the font company, and then designing watches for luxury industry and things like that.
So that's several questions in one question. Um, and but tattooing truly is something that was with me my whole life, I feel. It's but in a lot of ways I did it almost in the reverse order that people usually do. I remember getting I remember being fascinated with people's tattoos when I was a kid. I believe all kids do.
Hmm.
All kids are. It's just something cool. Like why I feel that as a kid, when you start having to deal with conventions and people telling you, "Oh, you can't do this and you can't do that," drawing on yourself is one of those things
Yeah.
usually. And then you're like, "Oh, actually, in some instances, it's acceptable. How do I get to do that?"
Is it in Korea that it's actually illegal to get tattooed? I remember having a conversation
Oh
with.
yeah, yeah. There's several places for all kinds of reasons, but so as a kid, I remember seeing tattoos on people around me. It was the 80s. People would have like little stick and poke or these 80s style tattoos, and and I really got into a singer like in my childhood. I started listening to it was all kind of people listening to a lot of music. It was a lot of music going on around me, and as I must have been like 6, 7 years old, I got into the French singer Renaud that you know well. People don't really know outside of French speaking places, but really important
Very popular.
singer musician for essentially the past 50 years, and and he had tattoos and he would talk about the tattoos in his songs, and it was part of and it sort of made sense as part of that. But then quickly in my early teens, so it was the very late 80s, early 90s, maybe 1990, maybe 89, 1990. I heard rap for the first time, and there was graffiti, and I started connecting the dots and got into hip hop, and that's really what became the my focus in terms of the arts, like the culture that I gravitated towards and the aesthetics that I was interested in. Um, but interestingly, at that time in particular, tattooing was really not a thing at all in the hip hop world.
Mm.
I mean, obviously, it was very niche. I grew up in Switzerland, in the middle of Europe, pre-internet, pre-social media. It was yeah, it was a very different time. And then, so the point is simply that then for quite a while, tattoos, I would, if I kept the same fascination for those, but it didn't make sense culturally. They didn't fit in that world. Or I couldn't see how they fitted there. They just were like part of something I was interested in, like many other things. Um, because I yeah, I'm pretty open minded and I always liked a lot of different stuff. But I also need to for me to engage actively in things, with things. I need those to make sense, like to fit in to be put in perspective and make sense with who I am and my values and what I engage and the rest of what I engage with. So tattoos, I couldn't really see how they fitted in there. But so the same way, before I got really seriously into tattooing, I was into hip hop. I skated. I was a skated for very very long time. Probably like when I was like 6 7 years old, I got a little plastic skateboard,
Is there a
and
big
then
skate scene in Switzerland?
yeah, I mean, yeah, there was. I mean, big. I don't know about big, but there's a skate scene, and there was one in the 80s and 90s. And I got into that, and it was my first sort of entry point into American subcultures. But interestingly, as well, like once there was a point where the people that I would hang out with, I was still skated, but the lifestyle and the kind of music going on and the kind of people that I was hanging out with as a skater, it didn't make sense, didn't really overlap with the people that I was hanging out for in relation to graffiti in particular and hip hop in general. And there's a point where I had to kind of not not out of a lower like pledge allegiance, but really just for practical reasons where I had to decide and now focused on graffiti. Um, but why am I saying that? Because same as for everything else, like there was the need for things to make sense. And then it's much later in 90. It's funny. It's 93. I want to say or 94. Something happened. It was the first album of Warren G, the rapper.
Mhm.
First album, Regulate. In the CD booklet, there was a photo of a person's back, like naked back, that had a huge Long Beach tattoo on his back, and that was the first time I saw a tattoo that made sense in a hip hop context, and I was like, oh, it's possible, and that really kind of brought it back in a lot of ways. It's funny, the first tattoo I ever designed, I didn't execute it, but I designed a tattoo with the name of our graffiti crew for a guy from my crew. And the tattoo was pretty solid. It's interesting because I went in 2000, 1990, like I went to San Francisco for New Year's Eve, 1999 to 2000.
Mm.
And I
A
went
big
with my
one.
friend, what's that?
A big one.
Yeah, and I went with my friend Leo, who was in my crew, and I designed that thing, and he wanted to get tattooed, which we wouldn't. I was 21, he was 20, um, and um, and we went to SF. I didn't know anything about tattooing. I knew I was into it, but I didn't know anything, uh, because there was information just wasn't available.
Mm.
It just wasn't there. Like I
To
was
get the skills, you mean? To like
no, just
learning
to
the skills?
know about it, to learn about who's doing it,
Mm.
and in Europe you had a few shitty magazines, like really, and I bought them like for the work to see the work, but there wasn't really anything interesting in terms of like talking about who's who and who's doing what and who. Da, da, da. There was no zines, no press or
That's
really
very underground.
or media. Yeah, very underground, very like marginal and provincial. So anyway, Leo and I um, set out um, to uh, to go find him someone to do the tattoo on him, which we did. And years later, I realized that it's actually a pretty famous tattooist who executed my drawing on him. It's uh, a tattooist from SF called Juan. Now I'm forgetting his family name. Puente. Who's a famous, super like iconic OG from the Bay Area. Black Hot Tattoo is their tattoo studio. And I found a photo of Leo getting tattooed.
Oh
And I
wow.
was like, this is fucking
That's my
Juan. This
tattoo.
is Juan Puente. No, I still have the photo, but I texted, I told Juan once. Um, you know, not that he has to care so much. It's more relevant to my story, but it's pretty cool that he did that tattoo that I designed. And then there was many more years, maybe not many, but quite a few years. And I'll give you the rest in a condensed form. But I started. I went to the art college where I studied in Lausanne. Then, um, and then around that time, decided to start to get tattooed myself. And I found this tattooist in Lausanne called Philippe Bleu, who that I engaged with and asked to tattoo me, who accepted. Da da da. We started huge back piece, arms, blah blah, big project that took several years to complete. But I didn't tattoo. I was still studying. I was studying graphic design and art. At that time, I graduated, and when I graduated, because I studied, and I was very interested in media in general, just publishing, mostly because magazines, ever since the first Trans World Skateboarding magazine, and then Thrasher magazine, and then all the graffiti zines, pre-social media. I don't want to say pre-internet because internet was around, but pre-social media in particular, with blogs, that was the way, the only way to get any sort of view, any sort of understanding of what was going on in any sort of culture in general, but subcultures in for sure. No TV, nothing. And so I graduated, and then I decided to start my own publishing project. And that's Semble magazine that I started when I was in London in 2006, I believe. I was at that art school, art college, 2000 to 2004, something like that. But then I went to London for a year, around 2005, 2006. Then I moved back to Switzerland to apprentice with the same tattooist who tattooed me before that, and I was doing the tattoo magazine at that
So
time.
the goal of your magazines was to actually provide a platform for the underground, culture to be exposed, and understand, like, was it focused on tattooing or design in general and graphics?
That's a good question. Uh, it was not. I don't want to get too deep, but it could be a long subject, but it was a time when magazines were changing
Hmm.
and culture was already changing. It was the early internet days. MySpace was around, and things had been evolving. The the very siloed approach to culture that we knew before, and under the pressure of you know gentrification in general of subcultures, we're opening up quickly and getting more gentrified, getting more mainstream. Tattooing was one of those, like many other from music genres and the fashion styles, the clothing styles that came with those, sportswear that was starting to be streetwear. Like all of those things were evolving, and and therefore all the media that corresponded to specific subcultures were adapting to to adjust to those shifts, so the social, societal, and cultural shifts. So magazines started shifting, and it was a time when, importantly, a magazine called Fantastic Man started publishing. That magazine, there was a magazine that there was a precursor to Fantastic Man, um, called Re Magazine. The same publishers um, created that magazine, Re, and they also created Butt Magazine. What all of those have in common is that they're centered on individuals, and instead of being a theme or approaching a cultural practice, an artistic practice, they were really focusing on individuals, telling about the range of taste and interest that the individuals had, which was very new in a lot of ways. Because maybe we could bring, who knows, if we could maybe debate with magazine or media expert that the concept of magazine, like interview magazine, already brought a certain sense of that. Sure, like I never thought about it until today, actually, but yeah, that could be argued. Nonetheless, it was more of a sort of posture and something conceptual. When Fantastic Man started, it changed everything. And a few other magazines happened at around the same time, 032C, bunch of other magazines that were an extension of the zine scene.
Yeah, I think there was a big scene in the '90s because I guess because of the personal computing, starting to happen in the early '90s, where everybody started getting computers at home, etc. I remember in France there used to be a huge movement of zines, happening left and right, spawning. Like, some were published, some were just like home published, at very limited quantities, and they had um, those fanzines, where you had a lot of people that started talking about the topics or the people they were interested by.
Yeah. So what's specific about zines is that obviously they're really strongly themed. They're really about a specific theme, but they exist within a group of people, within a community. What happened in the late 90s is that zines grew to a point that it became commercial magazines. Like in London in particular, you have The Face, ID, Dazed and Confused. Those are all the first among that generation of magazines at that time that sort of blew up from the zine. But they were still very strongly themed, even though they were very individual. And all of a sudden, this perspective rotated, like was sort of turned inside out, and all of a sudden, magazines became much more about individuals. That would explain where the individual is the red thread, not a specific cultural practice. And that's exactly how I felt. This had been, at that point I was in my mid-20s, and I felt it was really relevant to the way I approached things, to essentially being perfectly fine, being interested in a wide array of things that might on the surface look look versus disparate, a bit all over the place or incoherent, but where I found some common themes and some common qualities and interests in all of those things, from some types of arts that I was interested in, from graffiti, tattooing, skateboarding, political activism, um, other things related to sexuality, whatever, kink, BDSM, whatever. So all of a sudden, when I was still in art college, those magazines showed me that not only that perspective existed, it was not just me. It existed, but it was possible to create media that represented that perspective and that truly were structured in such a way and that people would connect with it. People did connect with it very strongly. That's the perspective I took with Bleu magazine. It was not about a theme. It was not about tattooing or about specific cultural artistic fields. It was about representing the individuals that I encountered, the communities that I was part of, and got to understand when I moved to London that there were many more people. There were entire communities who had the exact same very wide spectrum of interests, from fashion to and that were seeking out very specifically this kind of clothing style, this kind of music, this kind of, and tattooing was part of that all of a sudden. That's what really sort of brought me there. And I felt that tattooing had never been shown like this in the context of what does a person who is interested in tattooing, but also is interested in fashion, in poetry, whatever else, all of those other things. Um, who is this person? How do I represent a person like that, who happens to be a person like me as well, in a publication? And that's what Bleu was. It was an attempt to create a media representative of this moment in time and the people at that time who had this open-mindedness and who didn't define themselves, because that's also something that was completely changing in the 80s and before. You were into rock, you were into the Beatles, you were a hippie, you were a punk, you were into, goth or rap or whatever. That came as a whole package. It was your identity. It was a full package. And that progressively changed to get to a level where people would take only certain elements of each thing. They wouldn't take the whole package. They made their personal package. They were empowered and inspired, but also knowledgeable enough and had enough access to different things to be able to like be into graffiti, but be listening to, like some like grunge or whatever. Like a lot of my friends who did graffiti weren't even listening to rap, or skaters who never liked rap before. All of a sudden they were into Wu-Tang and or got into 3 6 Mafia or whatever. And that felt so right to me. That felt like exactly that moment that I had been fantasizing about. And Bleu was a representation of that.
So it's super interesting. You're talking about Bleu in such details, and I'm curious. Like, so there's definitely a vision behind it, right? And you're what, in your late 20s?
Yeah, mid to late.
Yeah, mid to late 20s. And so that's in a era where it's not especially like super easy to come up with an idea like that and then say, hey, I'm gonna just publish a magazine, right? So what did it take to make it happen?
Oh, that's a good question. A bit of desperation, frankly. um, I think it had to do with the fact that I had felt always out of place, always that in every field that I strongly engaged with, I always also felt like an outsider. I felt I was only always just only one side of me that I could present there, and I felt fine. Like it was exhilarating and exciting often, but after a while, I was like, that's not the whole thing. It's not that there's something bigger than that. Um, and frankly, so interestingly, before I went to art college, I went to university. I studied human sciences at a university. I studied psychology, sociology, etc. And during that time, I connected with a group of kind of of like say alt left anarchist type political activism, and one thing that we did with that group of people was publishing a zine, and that was really interesting because that was a first the first step in understanding what it takes to gather people to write articles, but even before that, I feel like skateboarding was the very first time all of a sudden I was like, okay, you have that thing with the wheels, and all of the urbanism, all of the shapes, all of the things you have around you in a city or wherever you are, the countryside, it's not even the city, like you can interact with those however you please in a way that is allowed by that thing.
Mm.
you know and you can entirely rethink how you interact with things, with space, with le mobilier urbain. Just and then so that was skateboarding. Like you would sit in places or grind, whatever, go down, like slide down, whatever. um but then graffiti was even the next level of that. All of a sudden everything becomes possible, and not only becomes possible for yourself, but then you can even use that to express things to other people. Like people have to address it in ways that skateboarding is cool, and it's awesome. But with graffiti, you really have like this tension and like with society around you.
It communicates.
Yeah, exactly. It's like branding and advertising with no object.
Mm.
It's you will be using all of the strategies that branding and advertising use, but you're not selling anything. you know, um, and that was, and all of a sudden just being like, no, you can do that, and you can, and it can be fun, and it can be interesting, and it can be, it can be subversive or controversial, but it also can be very thought provoking and innovative. Um, and I feel that was my first steps in realizing the power of just being like, of not accepting the codes, and be like, people tell you cannot, really in a double sense of the term of can, you're not allowed to, but also you're not able to. You cannot, meaning either, but really you can just fucking do it. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? And I feel that when I got to publishing, to art college, and I felt that need, I just really needed to. It was not really. It was never like. It was never doing it, making it happen, that I felt a big challenge. It was to get to the point where my vision was clear enough that I felt confident doing it, and that took me yeah, it's maturity. It was a form of maturity. I personally felt like still very kind of childish and uncertain in terms of who I was and what I wanted in life. And up until my 20s, I didn't feel mature at all. I felt like quite. I was really deep in that effort to make sense of things constantly.
Did you
And
start it by yourself, or did you work with actually a group of people to get the first one out?
well, both, because so I did everything I could. So I did a lot of the writing, I did a lot of the photography, um, I I did all the graphic design, I coordinated everything. But then I had contributors, people who literally like wrote stuff. But it's interesting. The very first contributor I remember very very clearly, and it's someone that I still consider a very dear friend. Someone I met who then lived in Texas. I had never set foot in Texas, and through MySpace, I started talking to this person, um, and I talked about that magazine that I was interested to do. And my friend Teresa, that I'm is still a close friend of mine, and and she was the first person who ever said, "I'll write something for you." Like, you will? Like, yeah, okay. And it was as simple as her sending an image and a text. I was like, okay, all right, we're doing this. And I created a template. I created a maquette, a layout,
Yeah.
a base layout for the thing. Um, and I started asking other people, and it's cool. Like, it was at a time when publishing was still such a special thing. It's almost, now it's probably hard to imagine to anyone, because it's almost like we want less publishing, less
Yeah.
content. Like, there's too much. Well, or the abundance is a bit overwhelming. Back then, it was so complicated. It's interesting, because even your question, you know what I'm talking about. A lot of younger people will not know what we're
Yeah.
talking about. It was a time when putting together a magazine was a big deal. It was really complex, and it's still complex if you want to do something good. That's the problem. The thing today is not so much that it became easier to create things. It became easier to create poorly made or lower quality stuff. The lower quality thing it is not really weeded out in the way it was before. Mind you, I don't think it's bad. I think a lot of problematic thing came in previous eras with that kind of threshold to be allowed to publish, allowed to produce music, to get visibility.
There was
was a
so
lot
much
of
demand to be published, like really when you signed the deal, that was like, oh my God, this is amazing,
Yeah, but the conditions, but what is interesting to me is that with that kind of sign off, when you wanted to create music, have a record out, have a movie out, have a fashion collection out, become a tattooist, become an artist, you had to go through some hoops, some validation that that was often not only and sometimes even very marginally based on the quality of what your proposition, but had much more to do with gatekeeping and who you were and who you knew and how wealthy you were, et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, that's a side note, but all that to say, I'm not nostalgic of a time when things were harder
So how did
to
you get it
produce.
published?
But I published it myself.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Look, it was a point where in my mid 20s, I had graduated. I did two courses. I did 7 years in university. I graduated from high school, a scientific kind of a major in high school, pretty advanced in Switzerland. Then I went to do human sciences. Then I went to art college. At that point, frankly, I had acquired enough understanding of the world and enough connections, enough confidence that I was like, okay, it's a lot, but I can do it. I see the picture. I see the sequence. I need to tick those boxes just one after the other and do it. And so that's what I did. For me, it was more doing the thing was not scary. It was getting the vision that was, well, not scary, but the challenge was not so much to do the thing once I have the vision. It's to get to a point where I have the vision.
Well, I guess it was pretty challenging in the 90s to like self-publish something with a quality standard that's pretty high, that's meeting, like the higher standards you have on the market, right? Um, it's something that is challenging for somebody, to execute, right? So I'm curious about that, in the 90s, how you do that, self-publish, and did it meet success on the first
Yeah.
release?
Well, it did because it was people needed it. It was there was a need. I don't want to say demand because demand suggests a bit more of a structured kind of vision of a group of people. Like that's what we want. But there was a need for something like that. Clearly, something that I saw just that I could by talking to people, like they don't feel represented. I do think that they will fuck with that thing like if they do feel represented, and it's interesting because it's a process I'm going through currently with my my or that I'm slowly sort of working towards um to create and launch my own watch brand, my own watch company next year or at some point in the future. So I think it's really interesting in that respect that it really reminds me of those early days of Bleu magazine. Be like, okay, this check, graphic design check, photography check, copywriting, copy editing check, printing check, distribution check. A lot of it I did all myself. Like I borrowed money from some friends to go to print. I paid, I don't know, but like around 3,000 euros, maybe $4,000 to print the first copies. I didn't have that money. I borrowed it.
Which was a lot
And
of money at the time, right?
yeah, yeah, it sure was. And I just put it all in my in a luggage, and I just traveled around Europe to bring it to shops, bring it to places, sold to friends, like people who wanted to buy a copy. Um,
And what shops would buy it from you? Like, who would be most interested at the time
um,
to represent
book
that culture, right?
bookshops,
Yeah,
a lot of
bookshops.
art
Mm-hmm.
bookshops. London was a good place to start anyway because there was such a critical mass of publishing happening there, and people loved magazines. Like it was a thing that people just loved to look, and there were a lot of really good bookshops and places that specialized in fashion and art magazines, like Artwords and uh, OFR in Paris. Uh, uh, the Tate Modern um, bookshop had maybe still has like a really strong like zine thing, huge scene in Berlin, Port QM, Do You Read Me, places like that. There was one in Stockholm called Paper Cut, if I'm not mistaken. Um, what else? Like, and yeah, people were just excited. Like I kind of piggybacked on other distribution, sort of zine, like not like less commercial than the really big distributors that required big numbers that wouldn't pay, like would there was kind of but so there were like lower level distribution networks that existed for the purpose of people like projects like that, and I kind of followed those, but did a lot of distribution myself. But yeah,
So it's
but
interesting
people.
because you identify. I mean, like from your story, you clearly identify the ideal like target based on your direct experience
Mhm.
and connection with the people, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It really was this very slowly matured perception of the audience and the needs. Absolutely. But to answer your question, yeah, immediately it sort of blew up. Um, Actually, one place that I really owe a little, I owe a lot to all of those bookshops that I mentioned. Another one that will be that maybe a lot of people might recognize is Colette in Paris. That was one of the like very early on. They got all the magazines and sold a lot of those. That was their bestseller for a little while. Um, like when we launched each issue, there were 6 issues, um, and uh, and yeah, like they really supported places like that. There was this support system for projects like that, and people engaged with it. It was fresh for people in fashion. It was like like something fresh and interesting. It was obviously for the tattoo world. It was a first thing representing tattooing in relation to other cultures. So that was very new to the tattoo world. Some people hated it. A lot of people liked it. It was expected. Um, People in every other field, like people in human sciences. I even actually, it's funny. I was invited once to French television, um, a show, a little late night show called Les Mots de Minuit.
Oh yeah,
It's still on the archives. It's still
still.
you can find it, you can stream it. And I was invited there to talk about body modification and identities. Um, so yeah, it was fun. It felt good. It was the first time I felt okay. I'm not completely out of my mind. Like I'm actually onto something.
So what made you switch to tattooing? Because
Well,
it seems like you're on a trajectory, with the
mhm.
publishing and
Oh, it's a good question. I So it's not really it doesn't happen like in a sequence like that. It's not that I switched from that to tattooing. The idea of becoming a tattoo artist, tattooing myself came actually as a sort of it just it came very very naturally from my experience of getting tattooed, where I felt that the the practice, the act of tattooing, was the most all-encompassing of everything that I liked, everything that made sense to me, of all practices, like professional or like serious, real world practices that I had tested before. And even at that time, so I was getting tattooed while I was in arts college. And frankly, a lot of things I loved about that world and what I was learning at art college, but also, to be honest, a lot I didn't. And a lot I was like, what is that? Like, this is not, I find it lame, or I did disagree, or just don't engage with it. So still the publishing was a means to an end. It was something that I loved, and I felt the vision was right, and I was skilled enough to be able to do it in a way that people liked. But it didn't feel, it was not something that I felt connected to enough in its materialization that I could then just run with it and be like, no, that's the work of my life. Whereas my experience during that time, my experience getting tattooed, I felt if I can apply that vision that is represented in Bleu magazine to tattooing it as something that I do, then I will have the whole thing. And that's where it got. So I consider Bleu magazine to have been a form of manifesto. To me, everything there was almost a manual or manifesto of what I thought, what I wanted to include in my practice of tattooing. And it was really bringing the two together that was this final kind of, supernova of like everything sort of falling into place.
It didn't feel like a risk for you, like you have something going on with the publishing that seems to like blow out and really work, and then taking the risk, to like, kind of like start tattooing and maybe shift,
Yeah.
your career and
Not
having
in,
to let that go maybe at some point.
so yes, but not not exactly in those terms. One thing that also was happening at the same time, and I'm really talking about 2 years time, 3 years maybe, literally between 2007, which is more or less the official kind of inception of like the beginning of Semble magazine, 2006, 2007, maybe even 2005, but that would be like pushing it. That was maybe the first idea. But I think the first issue was 2007. Between 2007 and 2010, pretty much literally during those years, I saw magazines become obsolete. Print magazines go from being the go-to, the main focal point media for anything cultural, anything artistic, to being obsolete. Or at least I could see where it was going, because Tumblr replaced uh, um, MySpace, and Tumblr was so powerful as a real social media, as a real like way to present content. MySpace was not about content. MySpace was more about, it was more like Facebook.
Yeah.
Tumblr was about content, and all of a sudden it was absolutely clear that print would be gone quickly. Like, not gone, but that it would become a marginal thing, which is exactly what happened. It took another few years for that wheel to turn completely. But that, I saw this happening. I saw it arriving, and I was like, I need to to get off that train. I need to jump that ship quickly enough.
A
So
lot tried to resist by shifting to like digital magazines.
no, but I did. But because later I did a magazine called Tattooism that also had a really big impact and a whole existed in itself later. But that's another story. But No, but to answer your question, yes, there was a sort of leap in the void moment that was kind of scary, or definitely like shit. I really hope this is working. That that works, because it's not so much that the magazine never made money, because I wasn't interested. Like there wasn't enough time, and as I said, like things were starting to shift anyway, so it was hard to find advertising. It was and making money even at that time was hard with publishing. It's downright impossible now, but it was very hard at that time. But I was earning a living with graphic design,
Mm.
art direction, blah blah blah. Um, did I love doing it? No, I actually kind of hated it. Um, but I had something I could earn a living with, and that was the first time in my life. And frankly, it had been a while that I was like, okay, well, what is my option? Otherwise, I have to go back to, I don't know, like I worked at McDonald's, I sold weed, I did all kinds of things. I was like, oh, all right. Um, so, uh, so at a point in my mid 20s where things started, finally, I was able to sustain myself financially, and I had something that, well, I didn't love, but I didn't hate it, at least, and I was good at it. Um, Being like, no, now fuck that, I'm going to go do a tattoo apprenticeship. Um, that was a big deal, because really, like, I really didn't know what would come out of that. Fortunately, the one thing that helped me throughout the tattoo apprenticeship was that I was also teaching. I had a little teaching job at the art college where I studied. So I was able to pay the bills, at least with that, the very base. And if things had failed, I would have probably focused more on I don't know, but like I cannot even imagine. Do you know what? Like, it's funny because there's a story. It's not very important, but there's really a story to. So once I was getting tattooed, and the artist who was tattooing me, um, s- I said that I'd be interested to learn to tattoo one day, and he said, "Oh, I would take you as an apprentice." And I was like, "Oh,
That was quick.
wow, that's crazy." Sure. And I had never really thought about that, like, that seriously. I was still studying at that time, still in college, and and that was like, click, just like, yes, of course, yes, of course. So in a lot of ways, like, often I was like, wow, what if he didn't say it? What if it never? But I have to say, as much as that was a turning point, but also, again, like, from the first time I went there, started to get tattooed, and then going there on a regular basis, I would have waited a little longer, maybe, but I would have gone to it eventually. Like,
Mm.
that was just what I was supposed to be doing. So anyway, the point is that um, I got to my sort of mid to late 20s, and I was like, look, if I'm going to take a last leap and a last moment to be like, okay, risking it all for something, then then it has to be now. There's not going doing that later. Um, and yeah, so like I did it, and then it took me a little while, but I remember so vividly the first day I did the first tattoo I ever did, and and that day I felt like being born. It was that special.
Yeah.
Like, getting to do a tattoo felt like it felt like almost a birth, and yeah, after that it was. I knew after that that even if I struggled with it, it would be worth it. That it didn't matter. Like, I mean, as long as I have a roof and some food, but that the that the sense of purpose and happiness, and uh like com- completude, the sense of wholeness, like, that came out of out of doing that, was worth any struggle, anything, any hassle, any challenge that I would meet um later, which is a feeling that I had never had before. Like, I always felt like, okay, I'll only do this if it, if I earn enough to justify doing this. That was the way I was thinking before, or like it's pure survival. But I felt, yeah. So anyway,
So how did you start your practice? Did you start like practicing under studios first, or like did you bring up your own practice under like Bleu, for instance? And
what do you mean by practice? Like practicing tattooing,
no,
or
no, I'm saying practice like your business, as a tattoo artist. Like how did you start, becoming a tattoo artist
well,
and
during that was
making your
during the
job?
apprenticeship.
Hmm.
Like honestly, as soon as I did my first 2-3 tattoos, my mentor was like, saw it. It was like, okay, you can. I mean, maybe not 3, 4, maybe like 10, but
Mm.
I tattooed a few friends, a few people I knew, and very quickly I was able. I had, again, it's about like all the different boxes to tick. I was old enough, and I had been teaching and doing other stuff. So I had friends, I had people who already knew of me, who trusted me with artistic things. And so I was good enough quickly with the technique. I could talk. I was confident talking to people. I was confident charging. I was confident producing the visuals. So my mentor was like, all right, do some tattoos. And I started working at the studio as an apprentice and tattooing clients. And then after a little while, so the apprenticeship lasted about 2.5 years, and then eventually, parted ways. And then I was like, actually, yeah, like I even got invited to go work at a tattoo studio as a guest
Mm.
when I was still apprenticing. They were like, come do a guest spot. Um,
I think like you just said like being confident charging. I think it seems like very a small thing, but like at some point you got to put a price on your work,
mhm.
and ask people to pay for it, and that's a big step,
It's a big step, and it's something that even a lot of very seasoned tattoo artists struggle with,
Mm.
frankly. I and I, sh- I struggle with it as well in the sense that I wish it was not part of it, but I'm okay with it. I'm fine with it.
And now, like from there to now, obviously you have a big following, a big customer base, and there's a lot of tattoo artists that are looking up to you as well. Asking. I see every time I can see you for the sessions. People ask you stuff. They look at your work. They're like, oh, that's amazing. And so there's a journey that happens. From the time you start putting the first price on a tattoo, becoming your own artist, and the place you're at. Do you think and I saw you post about being grateful, and I think that was really, really, really good, because I believe everybody should start their day by being grateful. We're too spoiled in our world. But do you think you're an exception uh, in the way you're being successful as a tattoo artist today? Do you think you're an exception, or do you think um, there's a path to get where you are that others can, probably follow as well?
Oh, that's a good question. There is a path to being. There's two different paths. There's the path for individuals to get to a point, whatever they do and whoever they are, to get to a certain point of, I don't know, like finding their place in general, including all the things and continuously navigating it. And then there's a second path, which is really related to tattooing alone. What is specific and what makes my position very pretty unique and frankly would be, well, difficult for someone else to emulate, um, was two things. First of all, times have changed. And as we know, like what worked 10, 15 years ago don't necessarily work now. But the other thing is that where I am in the tattoo as a tattoo artist, not only through my path was informed heavily by the other things I had done, but I continued to do a lot of other things. and I ensured that those would continue to inform each other and help each other. So the chances of someone else, and it was necessarily a plan. It was really part of my personality. Like I as I said earlier in the conversation, like it was this array of interests and values and just my personality and an effort to continue to work on what, like, for me, the best way to describe it is to work in a spiral movement. It's like a slow, it looks like it's a circle, but it's really spiraling and it's really like growing constantly. But you constantly just
Upward spiral.
What's that?
Upward spiral.
Yeah, exactly. Or outwards. But like, so it's a spiral, it's continuously checking and going back to certain points and sort of continuing to bring them together as you grow. And it's really related to the way I like to do things. But in terms of the tattoo world specifically, probably few people are in the same position as me. But I do think that my path and my efforts to talk about it, to share it through talking, exchanging, meeting people, creating magazines, like all the things I put out, or the apprentices, the people that elements of my experience trickle down and pollinated the industry progressively. And I was not alone. I mean, just to be clear as well, I was part of a moment. I was part of a zeitgeist, and I caught it. But there were an immense amount of people who supported, who contributed, and who continue to do so. So obviously, it's very important that I think, and I want to say, and the reason why, the video that I posted the other day that you were referring to, is not just being grateful in an abstract way, or in a spiritual way. It's being grateful to individuals, to specific humans, and people that I know who are sharing this thing with me, and the fact that we are in that together, and that I wouldn't be anywhere without those people, the people who are now still supporting, the people who supported before, and the fact that tattooing in particular is such a very odd, unusual thing to do, that expressing it is very important, because it is hard. There's moments of doubt that have nothing to do with, like, oh, I wish I bought a different car, or I wish I worked at a different company. When you've dedicated your life to being a tattooist, there's no going back.
Yeah.
It's a lifetime commitment. It's like, and if you've done that, and you're doing it, by doing this, you are supporting other people who have done it. So there's a sense of sacrifice, or not sacrifice, but there's a sense of more, like, it's not just for yourself. It will support others who do that. And therefore, thank you for your service. Thank you for committing to that. Even if I don't know you, even if even if we've never met, even if we have beef, if I hate your guts, still thank you, because nonetheless, like, if I don't like you, it's not even, it doesn't matter. Like, what matters is that we're doing this thing, and I feel blessed every day to get to do that, and I'm thankful to you, because it wouldn't exist without the other people. So, but in terms of how to get to where I am, like, I do think it's part of that as well, and part of something that, frankly, quite painfully, I accept to I engage with talking about what I do more. Not because I like to put myself out like this, I actually quite dislike it. Part of it is also a necessity for to, you know, for Meta and social media to, let me be seen by the people who want to see me. So it's obviously something that we have very little choice on. But part of it is also that I think, especially today, there's less structures, less vehicles or channels to support communication between professionals, especially in the tattoo world, and and but the tattoo world, there's nowhere where you can learn it. There's no university. There's no books that tells you how to do that. There's no school. So on the one hand, you have something that is where knowledge is almost impossible to access passively without having another individual involved. But then on the other hand, you have all of the channels that existed previously that have been compromised, mostly because of the evolution of social media and the evolution of the world in general. But tattooing had pre-social media tattoo conventions, tattoo magazines. A lot of them were not that great, but they existed. And there were more social protocols where people would travel, people would go meet each other, people would socialize and mingle and talk about and gossip. Whatever. Like, gossip is important. Do you know what I mean? Now, but for the past 10 to 15 years, people have deserted and given up on all of those different things progressively to put everything on social media, because for a while social media to a large extent effectively allowed to do all of that, and then all of a sudden, well, came gradually, but essentially in the past 3 to 4 years, maybe 5, it started really happening 5 years ago, maybe. But like in during COVID, really, we sort of turned a corner where the need to monetize social media pushed the platforms and the companies to really enforce the algorithmic feeds and all of that so much, and the formatting of the content so much, that all of those, so the secondary functions that social media had for community like the tattoo world were completely removed and compromised very deeply. So we don't really have, we don't to a large extent, what existed before has been weakened to a point that they don't really serve what they used to serve, and it's nothing we can fall back on. But then what replaced it has now been also deeply compromised. So it's just left with, the fuck are we doing? So therefore, the models, like for example, or all the protocols or the channels through which knowledge was being passed down and shared, well, don't really exist anymore, or don't work passively, don't just happen by themselves. So it needs to be a very proactive effort of people to reach out to people and to talk about what they do, to share their experiences, to share their knowledge. For now, we don't have the luxury to be too precious about like who, whatever. Like, what's important is that it's put out there, and then we'll start tidying up. Like, obviously, a lot of people complain about, all the people who learn to tattoo on YouTube or whatever. I don't like it, because I think a lot of people are full of shit, and a lot of people are just doing that for the wrong reasons. Nonetheless, for the wrong reasons, some good things happen. And the fact that knowledge becomes available, even if it's poorly formatted, if it can be misleading to some people, if it can serve things that I don't like, but at least it's something. And then the next stage is to try and put things back in perspective, remettre de l'ordre, put a
Back
bit
in
of
order.
order back in all of that, a bit more structure in all of this, and yeah, like continue to advance that culture, because in some ways, tattooing as an industry, as a community, or many communities, as a culture has evolved and has progressed in incredible ways, but also had regressed in others. And it shouldn't be like that. It should be only progression.
It's interesting because, like, I remember when I arrived in LA, I started seeing a lot of people tattooed, and I was coming from Paris. It wasn't very popular in France at the time. Um, and I was like, wow, it's pretty rock and roll. It's great, that you can see people, having a job and having tattoos, that in Paris, if you had tattoos, it was very hard to get a lot of different jobs. And then now in the past 10 years, I think, coming back to France, I've been especially in the past, 5, 10 years, I've seen so many people being tattooed, in the restaurants. Before if you were a server in a bar or restaurant in Paris, you couldn't be tattooed, they wouldn't take you. Or you would have to have long sleeves. And now, it's very popularized. It's like uh, everybody's getting tattooed. So do you feel that there's a lot more demand on the market, and how do you stand out, from everybody else?
For me, there's two things that need to be separated. There's the question of there's quality and quantity. If you want to look at it that way. In terms of the amount of demand, probably, but I don't think that's the most important thing. I think it's the quality, as in who. I think tattooing, maybe not everywhere, or the evolution happens slower in different places, but has been democratized for sure, and is continuing to be democratized in Western countries. So it's really the type of people who get tattooed that is opening up tremendously, and the perception, the overall mainstream perception of what tattoos are. So this is where it's important to separate the act of tattooing, the technique, the technique of tattooing, the act of tattooing, the underlying culture, the underlying, so what do you express? What kind of iconography, what kind of values, narratives, and who are the people who are doing it, the communities doing it. So and those three things can function, overlap in some ways, not overlap in others. They can be different people doing different things. Yeah. So to clarify what I'm about to talk about, it's important to see those three different aspects. I think the act of tattooing has progressively become less stigmatized or stigmatizing for generations, say younger than 50 years old, maybe even 60 years old at this point, in a lot of places. And that's great. I think what has happened is the act of tattooing in itself is like, you're tattooed. All right, sure. Let's have a look. Let's have a look. What is the tattoo you have? Is it something offensive, aggressive, or is it just something cute, something non-threatening, something that I can relate to, something that is intriguing? So I think we've passed that stage, and that's interesting. I think we've passed the stage where it's not really about being tattooed or not. It's about, what is it?
Mm.
How did you do it? What do you try to convey? It's like writing or making music. Just one form of expression, like music, like dance, like writing, like painting. The question is, what do you convey with that? And that's a beautiful thing. So that has definitely evolved, and therefore the offer, there is a need. So therefore, there's a lot of different types of need. lots of different types of people who want tattoos for different reasons, who want to convey different things. And each person or each needs a person who's able to provide. And the simple act of tattooing is not that. Someone who wants a tattoo to express, I don't know, like something political will not be happy getting tattooed by, will not feel that they got what they want if they go to a person who only specializes in portraits of pets. You know what I mean? Both are perfectly valid for different reasons. The same way, you don't want to be listening to, if you go to a black metal concert, you don't want to be hearing elevator music.
Definitely.
It's not because it's music that like, oh, it's music.
Yeah.
What are you complaining about? No. So that's what's happening. Now the question of standing out is much more about being very precise and intentional about what kind of demand can you be a supply for? What kind of demand can you be can fulfill? By doing that, by being extremely precise and intentional on what is it, that thing that you can do, and what kind of demand will it answer, that is the best way to stand out.
Yeah, it reminds me of like Seth Rodin when he talks about the purple cow. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that concept. It's the idea of coming up with something remarkable that is worth a remark, right? That makes you want to share it with others, share your experience, the product, whatever, with somebody else, and create connection with people. So you're buying something, whether again it's like a physical product or an experience, and then suddenly you want to share about it, and it creates that process of word to mouth, and then the word to mouth is actually spreading to some point where like that's how you're getting your customers, and that's basically the best form of marketing. Do you think nowadays, so back in the days, word to mouth was probably the only way you could, like get people into your studio, because the tattoo, I think, has a very powerful um, energy in that way, where you can see the art, and it's also like scary to walk into a tattoo studio to get tattooed. So as soon as you see something you resonate with, you're like, wow, who did that for you? And then the person starts talking about her experience, etc. And myself, I can't count the number of times people came to me and was like, wow, where did you get your tattoos? And then I start talking about you. Do you think today that social media has more power, um, presenting the art of tattoo to people so they can resonate with it, or is it more still the word to mouth that's bringing people into the tattoo studios?
I think social media have less now
Hmm.
than they did 5 years ago or more.
Interesting.
I think it's receding now.
Why is that?
Because of the so-called enshittification of social media and the very poor management and strategies currently happening in tech companies.
Mhm.
And yeah, I think it'd be a long conversation, but it's really the evolution of the strategies of the underlying vision or lack thereof of that industry.
So if you're like a starting tattoo artist today, uh, what would be your chances to get the word to mouth process started? What's the best strategy for you to adopt? Because
The
like,
question is not really whether it will happen. The question is how much can you control
mm,
and channel it? And the answer is that it's very hard.
It takes time.
Well, it takes time if you first you need to know how to do it, and if you, or have some ideas on how to do it, and then it takes time to implement those. But it can take time, if not forever, to even figure out the first part, which is to understand how it works, and it's very challenging for even for my generation that had a whole life who existed pre-social media and pre-internet, but we forgot, and it's something interestingly, it's the same thing that I see happening in the watch industry and in many other industries that bizarrely seems to have how like forgotten how things worked pre-Instagram, and now they need to jog their memories very quickly, or they're gonna be in trouble.
Yeah.
They are in trouble. Yeah.
Well, actually, like we had a small conversation during the break and about social media that was very interesting, and the process of word to mouth. Um, there's one thing that kind of struck me in your story of, well, we spoke about Bleu and we spoke about the tattoo, and I guess we're gonna get to the watches after. Um, but it seemed you had a very good clarity on the fact that you had to create something that would be very specific in who it was addressing. And I know there's a lot of people that create a product or a service and they try to be very general so they can touch many people, and hope that from that ocean of people, they're going to catch fishes, right? But then when you think about it, when you're trying to be too generic, it's very hard for someone to relate very personally to it. And I wonder if a part of your success too isn't based on the fact that you were always very specific to the people you were targeting, and those people happen to be directly connected to your own story, like to be like you, right? So you were targeting people that were like you, whether it was with Semble or with your tattooing. So is that something that you had um, conscious about, that you were conscious about doing it specifically for that, or is it something that was just natural?
It was it was a very constructed and conscious thing, but it doesn't being precise is not enough. You
Mhm.
still need to be you still need to have the right thing, whatever you put out, whatever you create. Identifying, you still need to be able to provide and be that person. Well, first of all, you need to have the means to do it, which is a big deal as well. There's a lot of things that I would have liked to do that I simply wasn't able to do as well. Like, you know,
Like what?
um, well, eh, often things related to tattooing. Like for now, over a decade, I wanted to develop a digital tool for tattooists, to help. Like when I opened my tattoo studios, I started realizing how lacking the space of tools to address the challenges that tattoo artists have in everyday life, in terms of everything that is not the act of tattooing, which is a lot. And I would have loved to develop a digital tools platform, blah blah blah, which I even tried for a while. And I designed a thing. I started programming it as a partnership um, with a development company, and the development company closed. And at that point, I didn't have more time really to dedicate to that, but also mostly, sorry, I didn't have funds to just finance that myself, and I didn't have the network or the connections to raise funds to do it. So I just gave up on it. And I have to say, like, it is what it is. Um, it's life, and but still to this day, I feel I could have done it. I definitely feel that this is one of the things where I had the kind of clarity where I felt, yeah, I had everything. The vision was right. I don't want to say perfect, but right. And I had, and on top of that, I had the ability to produce. So I had identified the needs and the vision, and then I had also the ability to materialize. I just didn't have the means to make it a reality. And it is what it is. But what what is even more interesting, if not ironic, and sometimes a bit, is that ever since I have a lot of tattoo related platforms and digital like things come and go, not a single one that I have seen so far truly addresses what I wanted to address. And frankly, a lot of those are mediocre, if not downright
Yeah, there's
really,
room
really,
for
really bad.
everybody.
And no, there is. I mean, no, it's not really that. It's that they simply don't have a vision. They simply don't know what they're addressing, but they have the means. And that's what's frustrating to me, is that you see people coming from, business background, finance, like throwing money, be like, oh, I'm just going to revolutionize this poor, like, cave people in the tattoo industry that don't even have, a digital tool for them, and they spend tons of money that I could have made miracles with, and not just myself, a lot of other people. They have the means, they have the connections, they have everything, but they don't have the vision and they don't have the product, and so it goes bust as well. So it's really this trinity of the need, the product to address the needs, and or the offer, the service, whatever it might be, and the means to turn it into something.
Well,
So
there's something that important in just what you said actually regarding the platform you were thinking about. Uh, it's very important, I think, to leave the pain yourself to actually understand the need, so you can create something that is addressing those pain points. Because you can have all the resources in the world, but if you haven't experienced yourself what the pain points are, it's very difficult to come up with a product or a solution that's relevant,
mhm.
to the specific people that live the same, issues than you, right? So
Yeah, 100%. But yeah, I think the I don't remember what the question was, but
well, I mean, like, so yeah, and those pain points, like, it makes me think about Samble, for instance. Like, the pain point you identified were the fact that, hey, that there was no representation of this culture, and there was nothing that was able to display that, right? So you're like, well, I'd like something, for myself, and you created Samble to address that gap.
yeah.
And
And by the way, sorry to interrupt, but that's also how I then approached my tattooing, well, style. It's a very bad term, but my own body of work. So when it came to the point of developing my own iconography, my own approach to tattooing, and that ties back in a little bit with the very first conversation about your own work and how I tattoo. Um, it was the exact same principle of that exactly. So it's really that sort of always kind of applying it. Sorry.
that's something actually I wanted to ask you when we're talking about your career in tattoo is how do you come up with your own style? What and how were you able to stick to it over time as well,
Hmm.
right? So it defined you as
Yeah.
well.
Well, so I think in the same way. I mean, it's. I mean, I don't know if the people who will listen to that are I don't know how deep I want to get into the question of really the tattooing style, but it was the same. Like to me, it was very obvious that there really wasn't um an overall. There were some people who were approaching it. Fortunately, when I started getting into like doing tattoos, being a tattooist, um, but really wasn't any tattooist who had the iconography, the aesthetic, the iconography, but also who as themselves as in their approach of how they do tattoos, how do the tattoos come to be in the environment that they work in the conversations they're gonna have, in the type of clientele they will be addressing, that that spoke, that felt like they directly um, fulfilled the needs that I had identified and circumscribed with Semble magazine. So really, in certain ways, when I started tattooing, being a tattooist, I continued to do exactly this. I had identified, circumscribed the what was missing with the magazine, and the magazine was already part of the answer, but then creating a form of tattooing, an approach to tattooing that continued to provide exactly to that type of clientele was what was kind of a logical thing to do, and that's what I decided to do.
And then, like, how was it? Was it something progressive, or was it met with success right away?
Uh, well, both, in the sense that everything needs to some time to grow, but no, I think as soon as I very, very quickly, once I started actually doing tattoos, people connected with it.
So people came to see you because they wanted that specific style right away. They
Yes,
didn't come to see you and say, "Hey, I want this kind of tattoo," and you're like, "Well, this is what I do." And I'm like, "No, I don't want that. I want."
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, very quickly, people came specifically for what I was doing.
Mm. So yeah, again, it's back to the same topic of, like, you know, in whatever you do, like trying to be very specific in who you're targeting.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I
So
think
how did you
at
move
least
on
it's
to the
part.
watches?
It's definitely a very important part of the equation. Um, and again, like it's in that case, it just so happened that what I was in the best position to create was also a thing that was missing. So, there was a huge void to be
Mm.
filled in some other things. Like, for example, I don't know, like I love music and I think I could probably make some music. I don't think I'd be great at it, but I could potentially produce things that people would be okay listening to, but I don't have a vision for music.
Mm.
All the music I like, there's nothing where I'm like, oh, we really need that kind of music that doesn't exist, which is also one of the reasons why I'm not making music. I feel it's perfectly fine with I'm fine with what exists. What happened with tattooing is that I wasn't fine. I felt that what I needed and what people who identify with me in the magazine did not have. There wasn't anyone providing to what that.
So did you know there was a demand for that style, or it was just, that's what you wanted to do?
Well, both, exactly both. That's what I wanted to do, and it happened that there was a demand for it. So I was like, okay, I think it's probably a good idea to do it.
So if you reflect on everything you've done so far and everything that's up to come, um, are there any, like, challenges that you met that were probably some of the biggest learning experiences that you'd be grateful for having?
Having children,
Well, that's another
but
point
yeah,
too. Like, we didn't discuss about that, right? Like, because I know you personally, and I know you're a family man, right? You have, 4 kids, and I've always been surprised to see the lifestyle you have on the professional side, and be so connected with your family at home and so mindful of your family too, and most people, at least me, I would imagine like, oh, this person is rock and roll and partying a lot because you've been tattooing a bunch of artists and a lot of famous people, etc. But you're completely not in that scene. You're like such a kind guy and family man, and so I've always been inspired by that too. That the contrast between your professional and public image, and your private life. So how do you manage
I
both?
I don't think it's hard to manage. It's not. I think it's almost the opposite. It's really about finding finding what feels right.
Mm,
So the things that need to be managed are the things that are not compatible, that pull you in different directions. There is some managing that's just logistical. Just you know, how do you materially make these things coincide and function together? But otherwise, it's it's actually easier to not to be in something where the family shares and supports me. My wife, who's also an amazing life partner, who's always fully supported everything and knew what she was getting into when we got together. But we really stuck with me all that time, and we stuck together. Like, well, she's now like for 3 weeks pretty much alone with 4 kids. It's a big big deal. I mean, it's really intense. It's intense for me, but it's even another level of intense for her. And we're doing this together. I feel like so so but that's how I always wanted it. This is my there's something almost philosophical about it. Like for me, it's what makes me happy. I need everything to make sense, like that, and it's by pursuing that completeness, that um the wholeness that I was talking about earlier, that I got to that point. But interestingly as well, things this status, this moment of balance, the balance um that you're describing, it's not something static, it's something dynamic, it's something that constantly evolves because of the world and what's happening and people changing, aging, circumstances, but also because so we want and need different things at different time. And I had a whole lifetime of very intense partying and very intense all kinds of stuff before family developed the way it did. And who knows, there might still be some of that in my future. And there's enough of that right now. Like I'm traveling. Well, if something happens, like if I want to go out, I get to go out. Great. Like I have 24 hours in my days. If I'm done tattooing and I'm immediately going home or being home anyway, because I tattoo really close from the house, and I get to go straight to helping the kids with homework or go like do dishes or take some kids out because they driving each other crazy and they're like they're fighting whatever. I'm like, okay, let me grab a couple and we'll take them to the playground or
Are
do
there a
something.
lot of parents
Uh,
that are tattooed like you at the school?
but if I do that, it's very simple. It's like there's no more hours in my day to party. But if I had more time even and much more energy, I'd still go party and I would still do all of that. It's a matter of priorities, and my priority currently is not that because family is something I always wanted, and everything else felt like means to an end when that came, and family was the end, in that sense. But it's not that I don't like the rest. If there was a way to bring it into this life or to share it with the family, as long as it makes sense. One day I'll probably go out with the kids. If I can have a date with my wife, I haven't had in a while, but we could totally go, dance or get crazy. Like, that'd be fun. But so it's not that I don't want it. It's just that, again, there's 24 hours in the days and priorities. But and having young children, as you know yourself, that's a full-time job.
Oh
That's
my
like
God, yeah.
more than one. So, if you want to be doing this, I wanted to do that. I went fully into it. And then yeah, hopefully one day the kids get older and I get to share it with them. Because, well, first of all, it's a beautiful thing, and I'm very lucky and privileged to be doing what I do. But also, frankly, that's the only thing I know. I cannot teach my kids or show them how to become a banker, a doctor, or, work in other stuff. That's, I'll support them if they want to, and I will learn at the same time as they do. But the same way they're teaching me about Minecraft or Roblox and all these things.
I got the same at home. Yeah, I get to play Minecraft with my daughter. So.
Yeah, and I went to the Minecraft movie the other day. It was one of the most insane experience. It was incredible. And I do want to say something about the Minecraft movie. Not the movie itself, but the experience was amazing. People were kids, teenagers, were shouting and dancing in the cinema. I had not experienced that. I was like, oh, wow, that's what kids are really passionate. It wasn't like, I wasn't surprised. I was not even surprised that they were passionate about that. I knew people love Minecraft, clearly. But I was surprised. I was like, oh, they still can. I felt I was at a punk show. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, or like at a rap, at a battle of the year or some sort of like rap or breakdance, b-boying contest or some of those things I experienced in the 90s and early 2000s that I have not really seen, or rave, whatever, like that, things that I haven't really seen kids do these days. And frankly, it got to the point where I was like, do they even get passionate about anything anymore? And then I was like, oh, they do.
I think there's also the fact that Minecraft became so much part of their culture. I see both my daughters, play Minecraft a lot, and especially the little one. She's all into it and crazy. And I'm okay with that because it's very creative, But then I think they live in a world where everything is on YouTube, and they kind of live into like a bubble, with their connection with the social media, and it's all virtual. But the fact that they brought Minecraft to the big screen feels for them, I think, like an acknowledgement or recognition of their culture,
Yeah.
worth putting on the big screen. And they get to witness that and be like, yeah, fuck yeah, we're talking about it, in public. And I think that that's magical, all the Easter eggs and all the connections with the game. And I went to see the movie too, and it was crazy to see all the reactions. And so that I think there's still magic in there, And again, I connect back to, Semble magazine, where you were trying to, represent aspects of the culture that didn't have any representation. And I think it's the same
I like
process
that.
too.
I like that parallel. It's interesting. It's definitely something I hadn't thought about in those terms. But I think the idea of being seen all of a sudden, this feeling like, oh, okay, I'm being seen. Like there's a greater world, and it understands what I'm doing, and there is this thing that I'll be sharing with other people who will feel the same way as I do when they come in contact with this object, with this work or whatever. Yeah, it's very powerful for sure.
Yeah, it was a great experience for me too. I was laughing, you know. It's so cool, and I discovered stuff in the game that I didn't know, you know. So that was pretty cool. What what if one of your kids one day ask you, "Dad, can you tattoo me?"
Same as, I would just, it would be amazing. Like, it would be a very strong, like, I tattooed my sisters. Um, it's something that was very, very meaningful to me. Uh, well, my kids, I would say, like, maybe see if you wouldn't prefer to get tattooed by someone else. But like, I know a lot of my tattooist dad friends, who have older kids, ended up tattooing their kids.
Mm.
It that's what tattooing is as well. Tattooing has, I mean, the amount of people who have their wedding bands tattooed. Like, tattooing is the one thing that people can do that connects them with permanence. Do you know what I
Yeah,
mean? That
yeah,
is
right.
tangibly permanent. And nothing else. Like, there's
Yeah,
literally nothing else. No marriage contract, no, like, nothing else. No house you buy, no nothing, no deed on a house, no contract, no, like, nothing else, like, nothing is as tangible. And that is the power of tattooing, is that, or the things that are tangible, they're out of our out of our control. But tattooing is under control. And this is the magic. This is where tattooing is more than, or different than, anything else. So I feel like, if done well and relevant, like, yeah, of course. Why not? I don't, yeah.
have you ever come across one of your tattoos like on social media or anywhere and be like, "Oh, by surprise, like I did that." Like that person, or maybe, you know, see a person in the crowd and be like, "Oh, well, that was a customer of mine like 10 years ago."
Look, I've tattooed enough people to fill a town,
Yeah.
like, literally. So yes, it happens often. Yeah, I mean, people on the street, people like, yeah, it happens.
Yeah. Any any anecdote you want to share about tattooing? Yeah, I mean, you shared, you know, a little bit of your experience like going, you know, in hotel rooms to tattoo, but like anything that, you know, kind of pushed your comfort zone and actually help you to grow as well, right? Like force you to get outside that zone and
Um, I mean, I've done it so much that it's more like choosing which one to talk about. But one thing that I have found extremely interesting in the recently, and it's still ongoing, and something that made me really question and go pretty deep in questioning what tattooing is, and how do we do that? Um, to a point that it led to a lot of very interesting conversations with peers as well, with other professionals, about how do we manage those things, and but also with a client. Even, well, on Sunday, I was tattooing a client who's works in psychotherapy, and I was having a conversation on the subject with her. So in the recent years, I've had one client on whom I've been doing a lot of work, and this person who works in arts, professional, like, art advisor, um, decided he preferred to be tattooed at his house, which is not something I do usually. Like, people can ask, but I don't really do that for quite a few reasons. Um, the main reason being that there's something practical about having. We talked about it earlier in the conversation. Having everything I need and being really efficient with having the really good setup the way I like it. But the other thing is more subtle. It has to do with, I know what I'm doing. I know it's not something. I know that it's something very special that needs to be approached as such, and that needs to be um, taken very seriously because of especially on larger work, because of the consequences
Yeah,
and
of
because
course.
of what it does and the fact that it can truly change someone's life, someone's so um and importantly, so there's that, and then there is the question of managing the relationship. As a tattoo artist, people will come and go. Some people, you end up knowing them pretty well, but for the vast majority of your clients, they will be in your life for sometimes quite a while. But as long as you're tattooing them, as long as it serves the purpose of them getting the tattoo, and then they will leave your life. And it'll be something very special for them, and it's for you as well, but you're still performing a service, and you constantly have several people that you're working on anyway, that you have similar rapport and relationships with. Um, so the ability to manage your emotional involvement in those relationships is very important for yourself and for the person. Like, you need to be able to get out of this person's life and let them, when the tattoo's done, like you might be friendly, but in most cases you're not friends.
Mm.
You have had this very sincere, very beautiful moment that is part of something else. And it needs to begin and it needs to end. And everyone needs to be perfectly clear with that and be able to go on with their lives. And in order to do that, and what's interesting is that it's something that psychotherapists deal with
Of course, yeah, projections too.
constantly.
Mm.
But in the case of psychotherapy, there's a lot of protocols, and it's something that's very deeply discussed, something that is part of their training,
Yeah.
something that is a constant effort, something that's extremely structured.
The danger of transference and
Yeah.
counter-transference.
And well, it's not necessarily a danger as long as it's controlled. But in the tattoo world, it's not something that is really talked about.
Yeah.
It's something that people manage more or less well, instinctively, intuitively, but often rely heavily on the context. When you do smaller work, doesn't matter so much. A person like comes and goes every day. That's it. But when you do larger work, it quickly becomes a thing. And often the fact that you're in a tattoo studio, there's other people. As we said earlier, like, even as a tattoo artist, you might hang out, like interact with the client, but not permanently. There's other people, etc. And you clearly, but mostly the physical context, the space in which you enter, it's on the street, it has something that subconsciously tells the client, hey, it's not someone's home, it's a workspace. It's a work where you get something else. It might be awesome, but you will come and you will literally go. You will enter and you will leave. And when you leave, you go back to your life, they go back to theirs. You just go both meet in that space and you both exit it. All of a sudden, so I've been working more privately for quite a while, but I have created spaces that still, for me, very importantly convey that it's a space specifically for tattooing. And that's important to me as well. Like, I go there, I have my little rituals, I clean up, I get into into a specific mind space, a specific headspace, a mind state. I'm like going to do something, I talk in a certain way, be it simply because I have things to do and I need to be able to focus. I love to chat, but also I need to perform something. I need to be focused on that. So when I'm in my space, person comes into my space and they will leave, but also I am in a slightly different space, even though it's private, even though it's and I put a lot of effort in ensuring that there's that. But all of a sudden, I go work in someone else's space, and then not only everything is tailored to them, but it is their home, their life, a place where I'm like a friend of theirs. I'm invited to someone's house to do something. So there's even a form of power dynamics there where I'm like, well, I might be asked to do things. If someone comes to my studio, I tell them to take their shoes off. I decide what music is playing. I go to someone else's house, I don't decide. I
Mm.
can tell them, hey, we start at that time. Like there's an amount of things I'm forced to enforce, of course, because of the need for me to do what I have to do and perform what I'm performing. But it's still their home. If they want to listen to whatever music or have their incense burning or have tea, like whatever, go to their own toilet to, all of a sudden it turns this thing upside down, and my ability to be like, no, it's in my rules, etc. It's not just a matter of control. Well, it's control for what I'm about to perform, but it's also a way to help the person feel the fact that when they leave, they go back to their life. And it was very interesting because managing that, working at someone else's house, so was at times extremely, like, very challenging, very difficult. And over time, as my relationship with him evolved, I was able to progressively be more confident expressing, like, still being a bit more assertive on the boundaries and all the codes and the rituals that are needed to happen. It's some things that I even though he was at his house, I couldn't,
Mm.
like, I was not okay with those things happening. Like he couldn't just take a call whenever or whatever. But but even though I set those boundaries, things still happened, and it was really interesting because I had to not only learn to I had to really wonder whether it was okay. I was like, okay, well, if I'm going to be flexible on certain things like taking calls, taking breaks, having people pop by, like have a chat, whatever, like those things that people do when they're home.
Mm. Kids involved?
No kids
Running
in
around?
that, but a very a partner, for example, that was very present. Um, so, am I okay with this? Like, is it okay? Is it? I don't know. Like, I didn't really have an answer really ready. What I can tell is that it's different, and that I have to adapt to it. But if I accept to go with it, then um, uh, am I still doing the right thing? Am I still able to deliver? Am I still in a context that I can where I feel that ethically I'm doing the right thing? Um, and it was interesting. It took a little while, um, and other practical things, of course, like health and safety, making sure that everything can be disinfected,
Mm.
sanitized to the
Sanitize.
level that it has to be. That was okay. The quick that's the easier type part of it. But nonetheless, like, you never know. You still have to be very, very careful, much more careful than you're at. In my place, I know no one's going around to touch stuff
Yeah.
when I'm not looking.
And
But
everything is set for
exactly.
that.
So I have to say that was recently one of the most interesting, um, truly deeply challenging situation that I can say was a very interesting learning curve. Um, but yeah, no, otherwise, I mean, I got to tattoo all kind of really cool people and all kinds of different, but like from celebrities, but also frankly, like, some celebrities have tattooed out the most boring people that I've met, whereas like some absolutely not famous people have become some, of my favorite friends and people, and and are amazing. Like, it has nothing. There's no correlation between being an interesting human and being famous, or having really cool stuff to say, or being inspiring or inspired, etc. So, um, yeah, as I said, I'm not much of an anecdote type person. But yeah, you know, I've tattooed now for close to 20 years. I've had all kind of crazy experiences, especially early on, from like going to party for 3 days in a row in Berlin and go straight to tattooing, to like, you know, tattooing people in kitchens and random places. I mean, it's crazy. What is really crazy is that what I experienced and the movement that I was part of early on, that, as I said earlier, went from not existing to being not only existing, but to being one of the most prominent genre in the tattoo world today. None of it is written. There's no record
Mm.
except what's in
Yeah.
my memory and a few other people. And it's something that makes me a bit sad sometimes to think that, I mean, hopefully someone will at some point. Maybe no
Document
one
it.
cares. Like, does anyone even care? I care. Maybe it's just me being, you know, uh, um, I don't want to fetishize my own experience, but if anyone ever cares, they're not going to be able to find a way to find out about it. And it's interesting. Look, I'm just going to make one. 2 days ago, I did a tattoo based on Pictish iconography. Pictish were the indigenous people in Scotland, or sorry, Ireland. Ireland. Um, oh my God, I'm sorry if anyone's hearing this, one or the other right now. Brain freeze. Anyway, and so I started looking up the iconography because I'm aware of it, but I don't know much about it. Clearly, I still don't. One of the things that's interesting is that I research, and the first answer is no one knows exactly what it's about. No one knows what it means. No one knows exactly how it comes to be, because that culture not was not a written culture. Like, they didn't have anything written.
Like most indigenous culture, anyway.
Exactly. And you know, it's interesting because tattooing is not a written culture; it's an
Mhm.
oral culture, and there's very, very little scholarship literature on tattooing.
It's the school of practice to learn,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
Uh, we work a lot with people, indigenous people, especially in like the Amazon, and yeah, nothing is transmitted through writing. Everything is transmitted through experience. And that's why it's sad because there's a lot of the knowledge that disappeared. We were in Venezuela a year ago in the Amazon with some indigenous people, and we saw the shift that happened when the government got involved and started, providing housing to indigenous people and started converting them to Christianism, where all the traditions became marginal, and all the younger generations um, were not practicing them anymore. So all that knowledge is going away as the people are aging and passing. But luckily, there's a few people remaining on the newest generation that still want to carry the flame and try to resuscitate that. But it's interesting because when you're there, the sense of taboo is huge. I remember we would show up in small villages, and all the ancient people, they would hide. They wouldn't want to be persecuted. They wouldn't want to talk. They wouldn't want to share anything. Um, and then when we're clear about our intentions, they started opening up a
Mm.
little bit. But it took us some time to gain their trust, and be able to talk to them. Um, so yeah, there's something that is also uh, mysterious in that, right? Like for anybody, it's very hard to understand what it means to be a tattooist unless you actually experience it. Because, like you said, there's no like maybe documentaries, but there's no books or anything that describe to you like the techniques and things like that. So yeah, hopefully, maybe someday. I don't know. I don't know if it's even compatible. Like, is it really even worth doing it?
I think it is.
Yeah.
Uh, I, th- I don't see why it wouldn't. It's, well, obviously, maybe in an ideal world, or at least as far as cultures and communities being colonized, then you can definitely see in an ideal world they never have to be colonized and you know lose their own culture and history to Christianity, especially. Uh, but but yeah, but in this case, we're not really talking about colonization. We're just talking about a culture, a culture that, look, for me, the only comparison, is vague comparison, is that part of the issue or the challenges that tattooing is facing, and part of the reason why there isn't any sort of record, etc., is in part because tattooing was gentrified, to use that term, before it came to maturity. Like, I feel that when I started getting involved in tattooing was almost in a kind of medieval state. It was there's this sort of very kind of pretty basic in a lot of ways, pretty like very sincere, very interesting and raw, but also very unrefined and not that structured and very kind of tribal in a not cool sense of the term. And all of a sudden got too much exposure too quickly, especially exposure to commodification. And that exposure happened. I talked about, I referenced that a bit earlier in the conversation. If you take music, for example, even street art or whatever, there's a lot of comparisons you can make with street art. So what is currently called street art, coming from graffiti. But really, for several reasons, the progressive gentrification, and commodification of graffiti into street art happened at a slowly enough, and in a way that a certain amount of history of graffiti was written and a certain amount of structures were established, to a point that the commodification didn't completely, other things like the legal enforcement against graffiti, that obviously changed and compromised the graffiti. That did. But commodification didn't really alienate and pervert graffiti and dilute it in the way that commodification did to tattooing. And the vulnerability of tattooing, with its lack of structure for knowledge, for history, for all the things we talked about, communication, all of a sudden, when it was fully exposed to speculation and completely unhinged, entrepreneurship from people outside of the tattoo world, who are like, oh, let's make some money, let's get a piece of that pie. Then all of a sudden, once this is gone, there's nothing to fall back on. Whereas some other fields, arts, cinema, music, they still have things to fall back on. They have enough history pre-digital media, social media, to be like, okay, well, sure, it's all watches, watch industry. Whether people are fully aware and know how to do that, that's another question. But at least they have things to fall back on. There's communities that are structured. There's all of that. Tattooing doesn't really, and that's a shame. I feel that what is at risk to be lost will never be found again if it's truly lost.
What do you think is the biggest danger for the industry right now?
Well, it depends how you define the industry. Um, I think the biggest danger is the fact that a lot of people who are very important for that industry are actually starting to struggle to simply make a living of it
And why is that?
because of all the things I was just talking about, because of the commodification and the very aggressive appropriation or attempts thereof of the industry by external forces. It's a bit abstract, but like the essentially the appropriation of that culture for commercial purposes mostly, and eh, by people who don't give a shit about tattooing, who just would deal with tattooing like they move on to the next trend or whatever. That has weakened the 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 professional structures behind the practice of tattooing to a point that it's struggling to support the people who are doing it. So a very simple way to put it is that tattooists have progressively increased their disposable income by decreasing their expenses and not increasing their revenue. And that is a huge issue. 10 years ago or more, and most tattooists, like the vast majority, to be able to practice, you would be working at a tattoo studio and you'd be giving often 40% would be pretty standard, sometimes 50. 40% of your revenue would be given to the studio to help you with managing your appointments, promotion, cleaning up, getting certain type of supplies, all kinds of things. Now, read in a very, very condensed way. It's a bit more complex than that. But today, you can probably do all of that for a much lower amount of money. So, say for the equivalent of 10% of your revenue, you can now do all of that. Great. So, it feels that you're in fact keeping 90% of your revenue. It feels to an individual that you're keeping 90%. It's a lot more money. You know, say you make $10,000 a month, which is, you know, it's a lot, but it's not unseen. It's a person who's tattooing, who has a good, like, you know, can totally do that. You used to keep 6,000. Now you're keeping 9,000. It's a lot more money. It feels a lot more. You can change. You can have a very different life if you make $9,000 a month or 6,000. Same if you used to make 2,000 and you make 3 all of a sudden. Different. You can get a different type of living situation, a different car. You can live somewhere else, eat differently. But what is interesting is, how did that happen? So there's two things about it. A, you have done that without even earning more. You still generate the same amount of money. But, you know, all of a sudden when you have that extra money, you're like, okay, well, if I continue to make 10,000 a month, that's great. But if I make 8,000 one month, it's no big deal. It's still plenty, and it's still more than I used to make. That's one thing that is very important in what I'm explaining. The other thing is, how? How do you cover all those costs for a much lower amount? Well, by not working in tattoo studios very often, or by working in tattoo studios but very differently. Like you might have apps or kind of apps and tools, like even the objects that we're using, the actual tools, the physical tools we're using have changed. They're cheaper. They don't require as much maintenance. They don't require as much cleaning. You can promote yourself through social media. Like all of those things helped reduce that, to a point that people started to be like, oh, well, the tattoo studios are still asking me for 40%. Some have lowered to 30, but hey, I can still do it for 10. So I'll do without. So they started moving out. So what happens is that all of a sudden you have people who you have all those people and that additional ecosystem of competences and just humans who relied on an actual industry, like people who are studio assistants, tattoo studio assistants, people who clean up, uh, tattoo studio owners, like people who seemed could seem to a practitioner, to tattooists, that they're not doing much, but maybe they were still doing quite a bit more than people necessarily perceived. There's always like the hidden labor, hidden skills that are not necessarily easy to perceive. So all of a sudden, a lot of that population, a lot of those entities like tattoo studios, tattoo supplies, all of that, magazines, the conventions, all of those things that I was talking about, that were really creating the fabric of competencies and individuals beyond the pure act of tattooing that was substantial, is becoming very weak and starts disappearing because the money doesn't flow there anymore. Even so, not only it's reduced, but it doesn't go there. It goes to other people, who are for the most part not in the industry, and even when they are, they don't really care about the industry. It also made people, so when you combine the two, the fact that people stopped, not only didn't increase their revenues, but often even reduced slightly their revenues, because you keeping more, you like get more comfortable, you're like, man, have more flexibility on your hustle less, but also that money was started to be funneled into completely different entities that have nothing to do with the tattoo world, or often, even if they claim to do, they often don't. What we're starting to realize now, well, not me, because I saw it coming, but what we're starting to see on a greater scale is that, in fact, all of that money that was still circulating, all that capital that was circulating, all that fabric that I was talking about, well, they were also a form of safety net. They were a form of support for people who might have a moment in life when they're struggling for a reason or another, and all of a sudden they're in a shop, they might, I don't know, be like having a burnout or like whatever it might be, and they can get support. They have people around them. They might have someone who's like, hey, okay, I know you cannot draw a lot, but why don't you just take walk-ins for a little while? Just help you pay the bills. We're getting enough people like walk-ins in the studio. Don't worry too much about, or maybe your fucking Instagram got hacked or something, whatever. Like, okay, just do walk-ins, or do, someone else in the studio and has too many requests, or is struggling to finish something, or has a client and they feeling too tired. So like, why don't you tattoo this person? That is gone all of a sudden, or not entirely gone, but compromised very badly. But what we're starting to realize now on the larger scale in time and space, because it affects more people, but it has been affecting the industry now for longer, is that all of that is part of what helps people continue to survive and go through rough patches or age. Because, maybe one point you're like, I don't know, get to your 50s, and you might not be the new kid on the block, you might not even be the coolest tattooist around or the best, but you're still there. You're a tattooist, and you're great, and you deserve to still pay your bills with it. Well, you're in a studio, you have people around you. You're like, okay, well, let's give a client. Let's make sure that some clients, like if there's a person who asks for a small thing that it doesn't require like someone super. It's solidarity. Do you know what I mean? Like good old-fashioned support, community, and solidarity.
It's also like simply peer support as well.
100%. And this doesn't happen when people are just like isolated in their little bubbles, in their little physically and mentally. And what we're seeing is people, not just people who reach a certain age, but people who might not even be that old, but like got into it in their 20s and they reached, I don't know, their early 30s, and they had a cool moment due to Instagram, due to all of that. And all of a sudden, like, shit, it's actually, no, it's actually quite hard. So let me stick to it. But they don't know who to turn to, because all that fabric that I'm talking about has gone so loose. And so it has been dissolving progressively. And there's just not money circulating there. And all those, that other world that has been uh, 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 absorbing, leeching on that community. They're not there to help anyone. They don't they don't care. So anyway, that's a long explanation. You could get
No,
much
but that's
deeper
super
involved, but
interesting because
see,
those
this
are
is,
aspects that definitely
but
you have to be
this
deeply
is,
involved in the industry to
this is the
understand that.
risk, and this is the true risk for the industry, is that once people, there's a point where people will have to be like, fuck, I need to find another job. And
Mm.
I've heard, I had never heard that up until recently. Tattooists who are amazing tattoo artists say, I need to find another job. Like, this is unheard of. And that is a true risk. That's the true danger for that industry. That's the next level of decay for this. And it really sucks. And it's serious.
Yeah, I guess it takes that maturity to understand that, and it's true for tattoo industry, but for whatever you're doing professionally or personally, it's very important to create a support system around you, because you can't do everything by yourself, right? And I think in a day and age where everything is online, everything's happening online, um, I guess we're trying to create those support systems online as well, but they don't support shit, you
No,
know?
but what is it? It's interesting because we were talking about that off camera earlier during the break. Um, at least the one thing that makes me still be, if not optimistic, but at least not giving up, is that not everything's online. Actually, very little is online. It's our perception that everything is online, but the reality is that it's very much not online, and that you can look at photos of food on Instagram all day, you'll still get hungry at the end of the day.
Mm.
You can look at photos of tattoos or people tattooing. It doesn't. It will never prevent someone from wanting to engage with the real thing. It has nothing to do. It's just like a mere representation of it. It's just like gets you hungry or gets you interested in. So the reality is that most of it is not happening online. We just need to shift the direction in which we're looking, and this applies to a lot of things today. So there's a general effort that everyone has to make together to relearn to engage and look at what's happening in real life.
Yeah, and there's another aspect in tattooing that I was kind of thinking about: licensing. There's like tattooists produce art, but there's no licensing possible around it, right? It's not like, you're gonna produce a cover for an album and get royalties or whatever, for whatever art you're producing. That doesn't happen. Like, you get paid for the job, and then once the job is done, it's done. Right? So, isn't there a model that can shift that to provide more financial security to tattooists?
But that is an excellent question. And there's a few different ways to look at it. One way is the overall ignorance, unfortunately, that the tattoo industry has of the legal framework that allows licensing. Just to be clear for people who listen, is licensing not as in getting a license as a tattooist, because that's also a thing we call licensing. To be allowed to tattoo somewhere. It's licensing as in the ability to exploit the intellectual property that artwork generates, or that artwork consists in. So licensing is the ability to commercialize intellectual property at will, and especially in a way that can be scaled and that can be repeated. So if you create music, well, you can let people, as many people as you want, listen to that music. That's one form of licensing. But then if you license the music to a commercial or company to use it for a commercial, that's a different type of licensing. And it will cost a lot more to that company to be allowed to do that than it would to a person to just be able to stream and listen to the thing. So that's what licensing is. And it's true. Like, the problem is that there's so little awareness and understanding of those principles in the tattoo industry that people don't even think about it. And this is where tattooing is a tricky thing, because it's not a craft. If you think of typical crafts, I don't know, you making your blacksmith, and you're making beautiful gilded doors, like gilding for like gates or whatever. Well, you working something that is artistic in essence, but you're not producing intellectual property. You're continuing something that has existed. You're in a different type of, and therefore, and you're engaging and participating in a professional structure, in an industry that has its own structures that in principle allow exactly what we were talking about earlier, which is people to age and continue to support themselves and support generations, and pass on or pass down the knowledge to other people and continue to maintain the knowledge. Tattooing doesn't really have, as we just established, a strong craft type, and even has less than it once did, a craft-like industrial structure. But from another point of view, tattoo artists do produce artwork that qualifies as intellectual property. Not always, but very often does.
Mm.
But because of their lack of knowledge, and frankly, very few people know. It's not about just tattooists. It's like, even I know a lot of artists who don't have no clue on how those things work. But if you're a musician or an artist, you don't need to know so much. You have labels, you have galleries, you have publishers. They know. And they make a living off monetizing that, sometimes in a respectful way, where you get, the trickle down of that, what is called royalties, and sometimes in very exploitative ways, because they take advantage of the fact that artists don't know. There's no such things in the tattoo world. And the question of, would there be? Yes, of course, there would. But should there be? That's another question to me. Maybe the answer is that it's somewhere else. Maybe the answer is something even different. As I was saying at some point, I think earlier, tattooing is not really comparable. It is a thing in itself. It's not a craft. It's not an art in that sense. It's not design. It is not illustration. But also, it's not, I don't know, like, it's not like makeup or like fashion. It's not like jewelry. It's a thing in itself, period. And therefore, the industry and the legal commercial logics that help maintain that practice in an overall societal and economic context probably need to be adjusted and different. That said, that's wishful thinking a little bit. But interestingly, and that's a pretty somber perspective, all the industries, most industries that historically relied on exploitation and licensing of IP are very, very seriously threatened by AI currently. And that's a real, it's a huge deal for a lot of people. So it's the worst time for a new industry to try to engage with that because, for example, very practical example, licensable image companies, Getty, Shutterstock, all of those, increasingly, they're not even licensing their the images that they produce. The revenues from those images is not from the direct use of those images, but from the use of those images to train AI. And that's people who have the size and the ability to enforce it. But currently, and frankly, I'm not sure. I mean, the what would need to happen to truly structure and go against that doesn't seem to be really coming up anytime soon. Frankly, currently, all the AI models train are infringing copyright laws as their business model. The ability of AI companies to generate the services that they make money off relies on the stealing of the intellectual property that's been produced by other people. If you take that away from them, their model is not worth much. You can literally go, I mean, that's been established. Like you can literally go on any AI tool and ask them to produce writing images that use copyrighted content references that if I did that as a human, I would be immediately liable to I would be sued immediately.
But I'm sure it's been happening to. I mean, it happens every day where somebody walks into the studio and say, "Hey, can you tattoo me this in the style of this person?"
No, exactly. But this is it's no, of course, and that's where I think that's an interesting point because that's exactly where the need of a coherent fabric, a coherent industry with relationships and with an etiquette, with certain moral codes on how people behave and a certain ability to check each other. Be like, hey, you just copied that thing I did?
Yeah, exactly.
That's not cool. That ability is very important and is being compromised. So
because if you take a client, that goes to another tattooist because he's cheaper and because, whatever reason, and says, "Hey, I want this tattoo that, Maxime did. I want you to do that on me." It's the same thing, right? It's like
it's a form of that, and obviously the ability to legally enforce, to actually sue people is not really, it's the last resort. And in most cases, people, obviously no one starts suing someone else, but you can go see them and be like, hey, what's up with that? And there's other ways you can ostracize someone, you can gossip, you can confront someone, and that's the main way those things are regulated. I can tell you with the font business, we've never actually sued people. We've threatened people to sue them, but not even 9 times, like 99 times out of 100, It's just like, you might have lawyers going back and forth, but you don't actually sue someone.
Mm.
So the point is that, but the ability to go confront someone is great. Once you have to confront an algorithm or some sort of an abstract like company, then all of a sudden even that sort of that's the ability to do that is gone, and clearly those companies don't even care about what the law says.
Mm.
So yeah, it's definitely a big issue, but it's a big part of something that was important in the tattoo industry, in its way to regulate itself, that is also compromised because of all what I was talking about earlier in this dilution of the industry,
So what
per
do you
se.
think is the future of tattoo then?
Um, that's really not something I could. I mean, there's a realistic. I think realistically, I think that the same way, if you're a blue collar worker, if you're in most fields, professional fields, people expect that in their lifetime, in a lifetime, they will have to change different, change company, change job, change, their employer, but change their job, as in change what they do. I think, unfortunately, the realistic evolution might very well be that people will practice certain most things, like again, like from like most professions will do it for a little while, might be a tattooist in their 20s and then move on to something else, have several different jobs, or that the majority will do that, and then a small portion will still be able to do an entire lifetime, an entire career until the end as tattooists. But I think we have to come to terms with the fact that that's probably where it's headed.
Mm. Imagine they invent removable tattoo.
Oh, it's been done.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I didn't
It's
know
rubbish
that. Yeah,
because people don't want it.
yeah.
Like there was a company that did. That's exactly what I was referring to, actually, several times of talking. It's exactly the kind of things that no one needs. So a company started that. They raised, I don't remember, like something like $30 million to develop this thing. Went bankrupt because,
Nobody wants it.
yeah, because there's no demand. Because who the fuck cares? Like,
Yeah.
you don't want a tattoo, just don't get a tattoo.
Mm.
It's like going to eat but still be hungry. Do you know what I mean?
Mm.
Like, then just, you're not hungry. Like, you go do something else with your life. It's more subtle than that, but that's exactly one of the things that I had in mind earlier when I was saying that it's sometimes a little painful or bitter to see the amount of money that some people who have no clue what they're doing but claim to do something in relation to tattooing are able to actually raise. Such amounts of money could truly change the tattoo industry if they were invested in the right thing. If you simply, like, with the amount of, if you take, like, look at it that way. If you think of all the different physical and digital tools that I use every day to be able to perform what I'm doing, from Instagram, Venmo, PayPal, calendars I use, email, texting, then taking photos, processing photos, the objects to take photos, the machines to tattoo, the needles, the inks, the bed, the lamps, all of those things, that none of those can be removed without the whole thing stopping to work. 90% of those, maybe more. I didn't do an actual calculation. I tried to calculate. I very quickly saw that less than 10% of all of those different things were actually conceived for the purpose of tattooing. More than 90% are repurposed from other fields into the world of tattooing. If you go to your dentist,
I was gonna
I
say
can
that.
I can promise you that 90% of all the things they use is made or at least tailored for dentistry. Imagine the amount of improvement that could happen if the right people with the right vision and the right understanding of what they're doing had the means to take all of that environment and tailor it or rethink it to really fit and empower the practice of tattooing. It would be tremendous. It would be amazing. That would be like an entire renaissance of tattooing.
That's a great idea.
Yeah,
That's
it's
really a
one of
great
those
idea.
ideas I have now.
Yeah.
Give me money to do it.
Let's raise money.
let's do it. No, I think it's true though. I really think that if there could be a true like research and development project for tattooing, again, for like physical things, from physical things to digital, but even just physical things, that could be tremendous. And that could be an excellent business as well. But that would truly could be something excellent.
Great. I like the idea. All right. So I think we're a little bit at the end of this journey.
But yeah, thank you so much for the opportunity. It was great, and yeah, like I think any opportunity to talk about those things and put it out in the world is worth, and hopefully that made sense.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.